director, and our whole team do an amazing job with kids from birth all the way through 12th grade. They have age-appropriate lessons, games, activities, and they're going to have a blast.
When you check them in, you'll get a 4-digit code. Hang on to that during service. If we ever need to grab you for anything, we'll flash that code up on the screen in here.
Now, if you're thinking of keeping your kiddos with you in the auditorium, that's great too. But if they need a little break, or honestly, if you need a little break, we have a room for you right off the lobby called the Wiggle Room.
Feel free to duck in there anytime. You can still watch the service live from in there, so you're not going to miss a thing.
We also want to invite you to Bar Church. It happens every Thursday at 6:30 at Mother's Brewing Company in downtown Springfield.
It is such a good way to meet new people and just reconnect midweek. Bring a furry friend, bring a human friend, bring your neighbor, bring whoever you want. Everybody's welcome.
And one more thing before we get started. In a few minutes, we're going to do something that we like to call Tell Me Something Good.
It's simple. Something good happened to you this week? Text us and tell us about it, and we'll celebrate it with you right here this morning.
We just love reminding each other that you are good and that we're better together as a community.
And if you want to know more about everything going on here at the venues, head to thevenues.org. There, you can give online, sign up for a connection group, learn about volunteer opportunities, and you'll find all of our upcoming events and information there. Also, find us on social media. We're all over the web.
Well, that's it. We hope that you enjoy the service.
Thank you so much for being here. And if this is your first time with us, we cannot wait to meet you.
How are we today? Happy Sunday to all of you. To everybody watching online, thank you for joining us online. I hope you guys have had a wonderful weekend. So good to be here with you all. We're ready to go. So if you guys are able and would like to stand as we sing songs together, that would be wonderful.
I was walking the wayside, lost on a lonely road. I was chasing the high life, trying to satisfy my soul. All the lies I believed in left me crying like the rain. Then I saw lightning from heaven, and I've never been the same. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. The sting of the fire, but I saw you in the flames. Just when I thought it was over, you broke me out of the grave. I'm gonna climb a mountain, I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom, I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. Yeah. Oh, I am a child of love. Yeah. Nothing can change the way you love me. Nothing can change the way I belong to you. Yes, I do. Nothing can separate. I'm gonna climb a mountain. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom. I am a child of love. I'm gonna climb a mountain. I'm gonna shout about it. I am a child of love. I found a world of freedom. I found a friend in Jesus. I am a child of love. Yeah. Oh, 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 I am a child of love.
All right, this next one we just introduced last week. So this one's a new one for us called Jesus I Know Now. Joke a little too far. Young word, he knows me. Every hair on my head, every story behind my scars. This is who I am, ain't what I do. His grace takes me getting used to. I'm learning he loves me. And the kid in the pew, yeah, the Jesus I know now ain't shaking a fist, ain't raising a brow. Jesus I know now ain't running away from a part of the crowd. Found a friend who hangs with the misfits, forgives and forgives again. Can't believe I was missing out on the Jesus I know now.
The Jesus I know now. Of the Jesus I know now ain't just a voice up in the clouds. Jesus I know now ain't looking for trophies to make him shout. Found a friend who hangs with the misfits and listens, forgives and forgives again. And the
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of
God.
I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child
of God.
From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I can stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing.
So hopefully next week we'll all sing along. It'll be a cute little thing we do. Okay, so you've been sending in your Tell Me Something Goods. We have quite a few, but I will remind you that you can send them in during the week. So if you want to store up all your good stuff, that's great. All right, our first one is, I've had several people visit my small woman-owned business from the progressive community, knowing we are a safe place for them to shop. To be trusted by these people is a true blessing. Love that. Yeah. This one is from Andrew. It says, I came out a year ago today. This one is from Christina. I am grateful that my life has changed and I have a wonderful man that cares about me and takes care of me. This one says, my heart surgery went well. I made it through my first week of sophomore year in college. It's more than I could say, am I right? This one says, I visited Duluth, Minnesota with my boyfriend and had a blast. Saw some beautiful nature. It was so fun. This one says, the venues provided nearly a year's supply of Kleenex, Clorox wipes, and $100 gift cards to teachers at Studi. Thank you to the venues and the Women Warriors. Your support is amazing. Yeah, I love that. Sweet. That's all I've got. Remember, you can send them in throughout the week too, or right now, and we'll save them for next week. Thanks.
Hey, what's up guys? Michelle here, and I have a few reminders for you on what is happening this coming week. Now, everybody says it takes a village to raise kids, but nobody tells you where the village actually is. And that's why we've got Together in Parenthood, and it starts next Sunday, August 30th, right after service. Bring your own dip and we'll take care of the chips. And community doesn't stop there. If you've got a hobby that's been sitting on the shelf, we've got a spot for that too. Creative Arts Unplugged is Wednesday, August the 26th at 6 p.m. It's an open mic night, and if you've ever thought about volunteering in the creative arts, this evening is for you. You can register for both Together in Parenthood and Creative Arts Unplugged at thevenues.org and find it under events. Next up, Venues Palooza is less than a month away, so I'm here to remind you to pre-order your shirts. And this is how you do that. You can either scan the QR code on here, or you can visit thevenues.org and click on events. That'll take you to the Church Center app. You can order your shirts right there. Last thing, if you're new here, or you've been coming here a while and still feel new and you've got questions, Next Level is today right after service. You can come meet with staff, learn how the venues works, or you can figure out how to get more connected. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for you guys this week. I hope you guys enjoy the service. We love you guys so much. Bye.
Well, good morning, venues. My name is Nicholas Horn, and I am part of the teaching team here. Happy back to school weekend, everyone. This is it. We are less than 12 hours, 24 hours out until we are going into it with SPS. I know a lot of the universities are up and running, so we're back in it, back in the fray. As I present our special song this morning, which is a time where we take any offerings and gifts that you brought, there's a phrase that comes to mind that probably most of us use. Someday. Someday I'm going to take that trip. Someday I'm going to call that friend. Someday I'm going to tell that person how I really feel. Someday I'll forgive them. Someday I'll slow down. And someday I'll start living the life I kept imagining. The problem with someday is that eventually we run out of time. Tim McGraw's Live Like You Are Dying tells the story of someone who suddenly realizes that life isn't unlimited. And yes, he goes skydiving, climbs mountains, and does all those bucket list things that we imagine we'd do if we knew our time was short. But listen closely, because I think the most important things he changes in his life are actually much smaller. He loves deeper, he speaks sweeter, and he forgives those that he has been denying. Maybe living like we were dying isn't really about jumping off in an airplane. Maybe it's about finally recognizing the value of an ordinary Sunday, the one we're living right now. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the right time, but this is our life, not someday, right now. So I encourage you this week, think about making the trip, taking that phone call, say I love you, extend forgiveness, take the risk. Live now, love now, forgive now. And because this is our offering song, I might want to add a little other one. It's the time to give. Give right now. Give now. See what I did there? But seriously, giving here is another way that we can choose today over someday. When you're with the venues, those dollars and the ones that you give stay right here in our community. They become immediate, tangible support for people who need those needs and who simply cannot wait for someday. And that is a part of what it means for us to be the venues, to be a place where love becomes something we do, where we see the people around us and decide that their lives matter to us today. So live now, love now, forgive now, and I invite our volunteers to help us give now. Here is the band.
He said I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me. When the moment came, it stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options and talking about the sweet time. I asked him when it sank in that this might really be the real, how to hate when you get that kind of news. What'd you do? I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bullet flew at you, and I loved deeper and I spoke sweeter and I gave forgiveness I've been denying. He said someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. He said I was finally the husband. Most of the time I wasn't, and I became a friend I would like to have. And all of a sudden going fishing wasn't such an imposition. And I went 3 times that year, I lost my dad. Finally read the good book and I took a good long hard look at what I'd do if I could do it all again. I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bullet flew at you, and I loved deeper and I spoke sweeter and I gave forgiveness I've been denying. He said someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. Tomorrow was a gift, you got eternity.
So my best friend in the entire world has this trick that he would always do about this time in the year. His name is Greg, but everyone that knows Greg calls him H, because his last name is Holtschneider, and he was a high school teacher and no one could pronounce that name. Even his wife calls him H. And here's the thing. He taught at Marshfield in the theater department for his almost entire career. And then he moved to Maryland a couple of years ago, and my wife and I try as hard as we can every summer to try to get up and go see him, or if he gets down this direction, he comes by and stays with us. But he had this really unique trick that he would do, this ability that I so wish I had. And no matter how hard I tried, I could never do it. It was this. On the very first day of school, when he would call attendance, he would go around and say to each student, okay, look, here's the deal. At the end of class today, I will have your name memorized. And he didn't just mean like at the end of class, he would call them all off as they left. He meant, I would have your name memorized not till the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of first semester or the first year, but forever. And I tested this with him. There were often times we'd be walking around through the grocery store or whatever, and he would see a student that he hadn't seen in like 15 years. And he would remember that student's name, despite the fact that he had seen thousands of students in the in-between. It was wild. And if you asked him, how did you do that? Here's what he would say. He said, I teach theater. It is an optional class. Nobody has to take it. And so I just figured that if it was important enough for them to be in my class, it was important enough for me to memorize their name. Because that's the thing about them that they think is really important. It was his way to pay attention, to care for the people in his class. And in some ways, he would use the same skills that he had learned when he was in college as a performer in theater to just kind of remember their names. Basically, he was just really, really intentional. Neuroscience is actually coming up with some really interesting conclusions about how the same topic works. I recently read from Dr. Avery Rizzio, who's a researcher at Penn State, who noted it this way. She says, memory success is predicated on both successful intentional encoding and successful intentional forgetting. In other words, whether consciously or unconsciously, the way that we improve our memory is when our brains intentionally make new neuroconnections between things and then simultaneously allow other things to go away. It decodes the information that we don't need to remember. I don't know if you're like me on this at all, but sometimes I get it really backwards. I don't know for you, but for me, oftentimes I forget the things that I really want to remember and remember the things that I'd like to forget. Like I walk into the kitchen and can't remember what to do. Or I can't remember the name of my wife's best friend from high school, even though she's told me like 32,000 times. Or I can't remember if I left the stove on this morning. And yet, there's like a song that I heard like 18 years ago, like one time, and it's kept on loop in my head, and I cannot forget it no matter what I try. I don't know if that's just me, it might be. But regardless, I think the reality is that most of us, if we were given the option, we would like the ability to pay more attention to the things that are important around us, and we just struggle. I do want to make a quick mention here as a disclaimer that I'm obviously not talking here about the physiological reasons that we often forget things. My dad has dementia. I deal with this reality all the time, that he is forgetting things that he really wishes that he could remember. And I want to say that those are real. And so I want to say this to you. If you are struggling in that space, you know people who are in that space, know that you have a friend here, that someone who understands the 36-hour day piece, that is a real struggle and is something that needs to be talked about more often. But as we continue our series today called Practice, what I'd like to be talking about is this reality that the practices that we develop end up developing us, okay? The practices that we develop end up developing us, and many of us want to be more intentional. We want to pay more attention, and there is a way that I think that we can do that. I think it's possible that we could actually make people around us feel more affirmed, more celebrated by just paying attention to them. And so today, the big thought, the big idea, the single concept that I kind of want you to leave with today is really, really short. In fact, it's so short you could probably memorize it by the time it's on the screen, and it's this. Paying attention requires intention, okay? I'm going to say it again because I think it's so important. It's one of those things, like if you take photos of a screen, this might be the thing to take a photo of, talk to people at lunch about it, but it's this, that paying attention requires intention. None of us just fall into paying attention. We have to work at it. We have to try for it. Because here's the thing. Left to our own devices, or maybe better said, left on our own devices, right? Many of us will break attention. We will not pay attention to the things that we want to pay attention to. We'll pay attention to whatever thing happens to be shiny and colorful right in front of us. I just read a New York Times article a couple of weeks ago that said it this way. I thought it was interesting. She said, in our perpetually distracted, screen-addled, multitasking age, when we allow ideas to come and go in rapid succession, we keep our minds too busy and wear them out. Nothing sticks. I don't know how many of y'all feel that, but I feel that, right? Like I have struggles remembering things that I used to not have struggles with. But Dr. Murray noted that this is not a new problem. She says, look, like this didn't start when TikTok started. This didn't start when Instagram Reels started the algorithm. It didn't start when we had social media. It didn't start when we had smartphones. In fact, she notes that this is a problem that's been going on for at least 2,000 years. And in fact, there was a philosopher by the name of Seneca who worried 2,000 years ago that we would have the same struggle because of a new technology that had just come out called paper. Seneca worried that we would lose the ability to keep our minds sharp if we wrote things down. But whether it was Seneca or Dr. Murray, society has a very interesting way of drawing our attention to whatever the new shiny thing is. It has a very interesting way of getting us to focus on things that we don't want to and distracting us from the things that we do. And there's actually a story that shows up in the Christian New Testament that I think actually deals with this. And I think that if we spend a little bit of time with it this morning on purpose, if we put the intention on the attention here, that we might actually get something out of this. The story shows up in all four of the books that we call the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If you had a Bible and you opened it up to the New Testament to read stories about Jesus, these are the four stories that kind of trace his life. And this is one of the very few stories that shows up in all four of those places. To tell you how rare that is, there are some other like kind of minor stories that don't, like Jesus' birth. Like the story of Jesus walking on the water, turning water into wine. Those stories don't show up everywhere. But this story, all four authors who wrote the Gospels thought, you know, this story is important enough that we should put it in our story. When paper was the new technology, when most people couldn't read, they thought, you know, this is important enough to write down. And when it's that important, maybe there's something that we could pay attention to in it. The version of the story that we're going to look at shows up in the book of Luke. So it goes Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Most people think Mark was actually written first, and then Matthew and Luke kind of copied it down, and then John did his own thing. But we're going to be looking at the Luke version of the story mostly. I'll refer to a couple of the other versions as we go. But it shows up in chapter 7, and it starts off saying this, that a woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume, and as she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. And then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. So just to set the scene here, Jesus is invited to the house of this Pharisee. Okay? And the word Pharisee there, it's not a negative term necessarily. It's just a term that means someone who was a religious leader for the Jewish community at the time. So I want us to kind of have that notion here that there was this Pharisee who we later find out is named Simon. And Simon invites a bunch of people over to his house for dinner. And there's this woman who, by the way, isn't named and doesn't say anything, who just walks in on them having dinner. Kind of an odd story. She walks in with this jar of perfume. She stands behind Jesus. She dumps the perfume on him, and then she starts crying and washing his feet. Objectively, it's a little bit of a weird story, okay? If that happens to you at lunch today, please text me. But it also says a few things about her that I think are just really interesting. And the first of them is this. It says that she lived a sinful life and that she bought this jar of perfume with her. I think it's important, by the way, anytime that we read a religious text, whether it's the Bible or some other sacred scripture, I think it's important to ask ourselves this question. How did people know what to write down here? How did whoever wrote this down, possibly Luke, how did he know that she was living a sinful life? It's not like she was wearing something that said, I live a sinful life. So how did they know that? For us in this story, that question actually gets answered almost immediately because it wasn't just something that was assumed, it was something that was spoken. The very next verse says that when the Pharisee, remember his name's Simon here, who had invited Jesus, saw this, Simon said to himself, if this man, Jesus, was a prophet, then he would know who is touching him and what kind of a woman she is, that she is a sinner. So, again, here's this woman, comes in, doesn't say anything, isn't named, starts doing this extraordinary act of service, and all that anyone can think about her is that she's obviously a sinner. She's obviously a sinner. And I'll be honest with you, when I was growing up, I would have just accepted that. Well, of course, the Bible says it. Everything in the Bible is literally exactly the way it's written. So obviously, this woman had to be a major sinner. That's that. But maybe, and I could be wrong about this, but maybe there's something else that we can pull out of this that is actually helpful for us to understand about how we pay attention to each other. This is kind of the first handhold that I want to give us as we think about the intentionality required to pay attention, and it's this, that the systems around us will often try to define what we pay attention to. That's why we have to pay attention intentionally, right? That the systems around us will often try to define what we pay attention to. This party that is happening at Simon's house, it says that Simon says to himself that this woman is obviously a sinner. And I don't know if he just said it to himself loudly, like, oh, she's a sinner, or if Jesus was psychic or how he knew this, but the narrative actually goes on as if Jesus knew that he said this. I kind of wonder about how often the same thing happens. I wonder how often it happens that whoever controls the party controls what everyone else thinks is the narrative. How often the person who's kind of in front or controls the space or is hosting the thing gets to control what everyone else thinks about it. My guess is that many of us have experienced this. Maybe when we were younger, maybe now. It happened to me a lot when I was younger because I wasn't the cool kid. I know that's shocking. But a lot of the time, whoever was the cool kid in high school or middle school or whatever got to control the narrative, and we all just kind of, okay, yeah, I agree. Whatever you think is cool is cool. And I wonder how often we still do this, right? Even as adults. You're home because maybe you have a sick kid or something else is happening. You start kind of like watching through Netflix, or you find some new reel on YouTube, or you find a new song on Spotify, and you're like, this is awesome. And so you binge through all of it. And you just can't wait to get to work or to see your friends show up at the venues or whatever and tell your friends about how awesome this new person is. And you run and you're like, I cannot wait to tell you this. And you tell them and they're like, oh. And they're like, that's not cool. And suddenly you're stuck in this spot, right? Of Do you say, yeah, no, it is really cool? Or do you do what I often do, which is kind of, oh, yeah, no, I was just kidding. I didn't think it was that cool. It was actually my sister that told me about it, and she's really silly, so I wouldn't worry about it. I'll be honest with you. I guess one of the benefits of getting older is that I realize that it's okay to like what I like. It's the reason I like the show Survivor. It's the reason I listen to Big Brother podcast. It's the reason. That's not a guilty pleasure, by the way. It's just a pleasure. I enjoy it. And I can just be honest with myself about that at this point. And yeah, I see some other Survivor and Big Brother fans back there as well. So thank you. There's 3 of us. All right. But you know what? Here's the thing. For much of my life, I think I would have backed away from that. Thought, you know what? My sophisticated friends don't think it's cool, so I don't either. And I wonder how often we do that with so many things that we get really excited about, but we think that our friends, the ones who control the narrative, won't like it, so we try to pretend like we don't like it. And I think there's a problem with that, and that's this. That when other people or other systems can start defining things for us, they can do so to our and others' detriment. Okay? Like if other people get to say what is and is not appropriate, then that can really hurt people. And that's exactly what happens to the woman mentioned in this story. We don't even know her name. She doesn't say anything. But what everyone assumes, because of the way the text is written, is that her sin is like the worst of all possible sins that we can come up with. In one of the parallel stories to this, the one that's written in John, this story actually has her named and has her named Mary. And oftentimes Mary, anytime the name Mary gets used, it gets conflated. And everyone's like, oh, it's Mary Magdalene. Not the same Mary here. And even then, everyone assumes that Mary was a prostitute, which, by the way, it never says. That was something that the Catholic Church taught until like the 600s. But somehow or another, we've kept that idea going that this Mary person was involved in sex work. But what's interesting to me is that this word that Luke uses for sinner or lives a sinful life, it's not a word that means that she did something that was morally wrong. It's actually just a word that meant that she did something that was culturally out of the norm. That she did something that was outside of what everyone else was experiencing, or maybe that she was ceremonially unclean. Dr. Barbara Reed, who's a professor of New Testament studies at Catholic Theological Union, noted it this way, that the woman need only have been ill or disabled or have contact with Gentiles to be considered a sinner by all Jews in the city. Her work may have been one of the trades considered unclean, such as dyeing. In other words, she might have been involved, and I hope you're sitting down for this, in the super controversial act of dyeing clothes. Clutch my pearls. But while that sounds bananas to me, and maybe it does to you too, I want us to recognize how easy it is for us to do the same thing. We see people, let me say this, I see people all the time who do things that are out of what I would like to be my cultural norm, and I suddenly start calling them the worst of the worst, right? Someone parks on the wrong side of the street, and oh my goodness. Or someone doesn't do something that I think is civilly responsible or whatever, and I lose it. I just want to look at them and point with one finger. Figure it out. And I want to say all the words. But here's the thing. I think it's entirely possible that society has done the same thing over and over and over again with whatever society wants to call the big sins, right? Churches have hurt so many people by misconstruing what is in the scripture to hurt people. They look at 6 verses that are way out of context and clobber my queer friends. They call them sinners. Society has done the same thing, by the way, with those who go through the through a divorce or have an abortion or who dress in drag or who struggle financially or who come to the United States seeking asylum or do a variety of normal other things. And society keeps looking at folks like that and saying, sinner, sinner, sinner. And maybe if we kind of heard this the way that happened at that time, we would think, oh my goodness, it's not that. Could it be that the reason that this is so hurtful is because when we can categorize someone else as a sinner, we don't have to actually pay attention to them. We can just ignore them. We can cast them aside. We don't have to pay attention to who they are. You know, I think it's entirely possible that oftentimes the big sins are just the one that whoever's hosting the party isn't involved in. There's a reason you probably don't hear a whole lot of sermons about how bad workaholism is, right? Or how important it is that business owners take care of their employees, or how important it is to take care of healthcare for people. Because those aren't the things, those aren't the cultural abnormalities that people who have the microphones often struggle with. But that's not what Jesus did here. When society would choose to corner this woman and say that's a sinful lifestyle, when it would choose to tell her that she is a sinner, I want you to see what Jesus says to her. It says this. It says, then Jesus turned to the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house, and you did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. I want you to listen really closely to this next line. When society chose to label this woman, Jesus chose to see her. That is so important. Jesus chose to see this woman, but we can often see people without actually seeing them in their fullness. If we are going to practice paying attention, it's not enough just to see someone. We see people all the time. Instead, and this is kind of the last handhold that I want us to think about when it comes to intentionally paying attention, that instead, that attention starts by affirming the unique goodness in each person and building from there. Okay, let me say that one more time because I think it's really important. I want it to show up on the screen too. That attention starts by affirming the unique goodness in each person and building from there. Here at the venues, one of our core values, in fact, if you walk out in the lobby, you'll see it on a big poster. One of our core values is that we are affirming and inclusive. We are unapologetically affirming and celebratory of the queer community. We are also committed to racial inclusion, to people being in leadership and service here at the venues, regardless of their race or their gender or their disability or their economic status or their immigration status or their political affiliation or whatever other societal things other people want to box people into. We choose to see people. And we choose to see all people right where they are because we choose to pay attention to them. We see and affirm the people who have been left out publicly. But part of being intentional about this is also choosing to pay attention to the people who haven't always been left out publicly. We choose to pay attention to the small business owner who's struggling right now because of inflation, who's trying to figure out, like, how do I manage my family with my work life? School's getting ready to start this next week. Sorry, teachers, to remind you of that. It's reminding folks, like, when they're trying to figure this, like, my kid's going back to school and how does this work, to remind ourselves that we need to pay attention to each other. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that I love going and getting coffee with people, because I get to sit down and listen to your stories, because we can be intentional during that time and not have to have anything else come up. You see, the way that we find out about things is that we pay attention. We don't just assume that everyone has the same things going on in their lives. And the reason that we do that has one underlying reason, and it's this: that we believe that you are good and we're better together. You are good just as you are. And we are better together because we can pay attention to each other that way. We know we all have our own junk. Some of it's very visible, some of it's not. But we've all been told that we are bad long enough. We have been called sinners long enough because we don't fit whatever cultural norm people say we should. So here's what I want you to see that Jesus does with this woman. It says that then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." And the other guests began to say amongst themselves, "Who is this that could even forgive sins?" And Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Now, I want to remind you something about this again. This woman hasn't said anything. It's not her home. It's not her party. She's doing something that's really random, and in Luke's version, doesn't even give a lot of context for why. And he looks at her and says, "Your sins are forgiven." In my older lifestyle, what I would have said is, you know what? Absolutely, this woman was the worst of the sinners. Jesus did this super miraculous thing and had forgiven her. How great is that? But I'm not sure that's what this says. Because remember, here's the thing. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't say the sinner's prayer. She doesn't walk down an aisle. And here's a mind-blowing thing. At this point, Jesus had never died. So all of our things about how forgiveness has to happen, maybe we need to ask ourselves some actual questions about that. How did this happen? Dr. Reed, who I referenced earlier, looked at the Greek here, and I want you to see what it shows up with. I think it's really interesting. She says, verse 47 makes it utterly clear that the woman's sins had already been forgiven before the dinner party. The perfect tense of the verb, aphenatai, have been forgiven, expresses a past action whose effects endure into the present. In other words, it doesn't seem like Jesus is making a new gesture at her here. He's not saying, "Hey, thank you for pouring that perfume on my feet. Your sins are now forgiven." Rather, Jesus sees her as she is in her fullness, as someone who has been forgiven, as someone who's already good. And this word forgiveness, actually it just means to have things cast away, that her sins had been cast away. Whatever society had said, you don't fit in culturally here, had been cast away. A possible reading of this could be said, the labels that people have affixed to you can be torn off. Those things that you have been told, that's not who you are. John T. Carroll, who's a professor at New Testament at Union Presbyterian Seminary, said it this way: "The dinner guests, then, do not have it quite right. The forgiveness that is affirmed and mediated by Jesus has its source in God. All that remains is for the woman to live as one who is made whole." Is it possible that what Jesus did in this moment, by calling out Simon and by sharing what he saw in this woman, was just modeling what attention looks like? When we don't just label each other, but see each other for the goodness that we have already. Did Jesus do 2,000 years ago what my best friend H used to do all the time? Did he look at individuals and say, "I remember you. I know who you really are, and despite what everyone else says, I'm not going to forget that you're good"? I get how that's hard. We have thousands of distractions flying around all the time that want to label people, that want to say that things are going wrong. 2 years ago, I made it my motto for the year that when overwhelm seems to be the point, focus is resistance. And as we are dealing with so many ways that we feel like we need to have resistance against all the things, let me just say it this way: focus. Focus on paying attention to each other. Focus on paying attention to the people around us. In this time, when there are so many definitions, so many frameworks going around, so many things that are competing for our attention, and the reality is, if we're ever going to pay attention, we're not just going to fall into it. We have to do it on purpose. Maybe the way that we practice attention this week is by being intentional about it. On your seat, or if you're watching online, there's a link on Facebook or YouTube. There is a little sheet of paper that says practice. This series we've been going through is called Practice, and each week we've been trying to do a practice that kind of follows along with the acronym of the word practice. So the first week we talked about the practice that starts with P of presence. Last week we talked about releasing things. Today we're going to talk about how to pay attention. And here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you on that sheet to fill it out right now and think you have to drop it back. That's manipulative. We're not going to do that, okay? Instead, what I want you to do is take it home and think about one way this week that you can pay attention to those around you. It gives you 4 options. One might be just naming one person that you've looked at without actually seeing them. Someone who you've put in a category instead of actually getting to know. Maybe it's the person who is your bartender at Mother's Brewing, and you just learned their name so that next week or whatever, when you come to bar church, you can tell them hi. Maybe it's being intentional about asking one person this week what they actually need instead of just assuming that you already know. Nothing more, nothing less. Just asking, what do you need? Maybe it's more internal. Maybe it's naming one label that you've placed on yourself, right? You've been told by society that you're X, Y, or Z. And setting time this week to see what's actually underneath that, who you actually are, and affirming that. Set down that bad label. Or maybe it's something else entirely. Because here's the thing. In a world where it's really hard to pay attention, paying attention is the most valuable thing that we can pay. It's the most valuable gift that we can give someone because it competes with everything else that we already have going on in our head all the time. But it's also a practice that we can engage in that really makes a difference in how people around us see themselves and how we see ourselves. Now, let me say this about paying attention. During the teaching this morning, you may have been paying attention. You were like, Chris, that doesn't make any sense. That's fair, okay? I'm struggling with this a little bit. And so here's what I would say is this. If there are things that you're hearing or that you would have questions about, there's a number that shows up on the screen that has a number where you can text in questions to. And if you would like to send in a text message, we actually have about 90 seconds. I'm actually going to have Josh come up here. Josh is a member of our staff that helps people get connected to our community and to each other. And if you happen to have a question, we've got about 75 seconds or so. If I keep talking, it'll be less. And if there are any questions that you have, I would love to take an opportunity to answer those questions for you. And if it's too long of a question, I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we can go sit down and talk about it any longer. Are there any questions, Josh?
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
So I brought you a cheat sheet. Of the 4 practices on the handout, which one do you find the hardest to do yourself?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good question.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure, yeah. I think probably the second one, the one over on the top right, the one about being intentional about asking what one person needs and then just listening to what they actually want. I'll be honest, for me, it is so common to do things like assume what someone else needs and just be like, well, that's what I would want, so that's obviously what they want. But that's not the case always. And so sometimes it's really hard for me not to just listen to people and just hear what that. So it takes a lot of intentionality for me to do that one. So I would say that for me is hard. Let me put you on the spot, Josh. What's it for you? You don't have to answer.
I wasn't. I'm supposed to ask the questions, not answer them.
Fair deal. Fair deal. Well, it is also 11, so that is your saving grace. And there is Nicholas, so he is going to give us some dismissal instructions.
Well, round of applause today for Chris. Chris, thank you so much for such an engaging topic of today, of being in attention and intention. 2 words that we really need to know the difference and also think about how can we apply both in our lives. We want to say goodbye first to our online audience. Online, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll join us again next week. For those